and welcome to another TOG chat. Hi, Laurel. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Bob?
I'm good. I'm good. So you and I were just talking about what we were going to talk about today, and one of the things that's been coming up for me, and I thought maybe we would talk about is the role of boards. What should a board look like? What's their role? How can we make them in strategic alignment with our work? And does our current board structure even really work? Like how do we feel about the way boards are constructed and how we think about boards or and just how they're practically implemented. So I think it's a pretty rich subject. What do you think? Should we talk about that?
I think it sounds good. I think, obviously this could be probably an hour-long chat, but we won't make it that long. So yeah, I'm curious to hear kind of, I think as we talked about as we were starting, I think we've been on some calls where you've kind of shared some perspectives on boards, and I've kind of been like, I'm not sure I totally agree. I think in 95% of things, you and I are pretty right in line with each other. I think this will be an interesting chat because I think maybe this is one where you and I might have some different positions on this. So I'm excited to jump in. So
Let,
I want to
let,
hear from you first, though, because I know you've been doing a lot of thinking about this and have an upcoming blog post with our partner Andy Robinson on this as well. So I'm curious where your head is with this these days.
Yeah, so I would say I'm sort of a traditionalist in the sense that I think that the current board structure works pretty well, which is not the same to say that it's always implemented well. And I understand that some people sort of want to throw it out for that reason, and I think that's a valid point. But for me, I would say a couple things about it. I think one, I can't think of any other way, as imperfect as it is, for an organization to easily scale their external work, the fundraising, the advocacy, the like, because to hire staff to do the same level of work is just impractical for 99.9% of all organizations. The beauty of the board is that you have these folks that are community leaders of whatever kind, and you can define that as you like, that can reach out into the world and bring in resources of some kind. It could be monetary resources, it could be in-kind resources, it could be connections, it could be advocacy for your organization, it could be staff, finding staff members, new clients, whatever it is, in a way that I just can't think of an organization being able to easily scale otherwise. And so while I think we need to be thoughtful about who's on our board and it needs to be in strategic alignment, I'm pretty okay with the general structure, just because I think that's such an important part of this work. And I just see a lot of organizations, and I've sort of gotten on my soapbox lately a little bit with some of the organizations that have like boards of really well-meaning people that have good politics and however you want to define that, and their values alignment with the organization, that just are unable, despite their best intentions, to really bring any resources to the organization, making the organization highly dependent on a small handful of institutional funders, which I think for me is even more problematic than what our board may look like. So that's my position. What do you have to say back to me?
No, and I think fundamentally I don't disagree with you. I think fundamentally in a perfect world, 100% I agree with everything you just said. But I think in reality, it is so far from the reality for most nonprofits that their boards are actively engage in advocacy and fundraising and community outreach and know what to do and are following through effectively and are inspired to do so on a regular basis. It's just so far from the reality for people and we've been doing this work for so long, Bob. So I think like this is the other thing is it's not like this just came up yesterday and we just started to tell people about like how to better engage your board and how to inspire them with vision and how to do all these things. We have been shouting at the wind for a really, really long time about this, and so little progress has been made that I think I think I just have this internal struggle of ideally 100% I agree. In reality, it is so far from what people are actually doing. I don't know how we bring those two things together, because I think for a lot of nonprofits, it feels like they are working toward this ideal, this philosophy of what a board should be, but it's like pushing a boulder up the hill for them, right? Like it just, and part of it, you know, you and I could sit down and say, like, do these 5 things differently and it would be better. But we've been saying that. And I don't know what the disconnect is between when people hear you've got to engage your board member, you've got to inspire them with vision, you've got to give them practical, you know, instructions and tools for doing the job. And yet so little of that happens. And so I think maybe for me, it's less about, do I fundamentally agree that boards should be engaging in community engagement? And maybe it's, what is this roadblock? Like, what is this thing that after years and years and years of not just you and I, but consultants and trainers and experts across the nonprofits saying, sector saying, here's what you can do to make this a reality in your board, and it not having it happen, right? Like maybe you know me, I'm like the eternal optimist. Like I am the forever glass overflowing. This is one of the areas that I get very pessimistic about. Like I just am like, I don't know that we can make it happen. If we haven't been able to make it happen yet, what is it going to take? So that's so with on that bright note, you know, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, well, look, I think that's all a totally fair critique. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, much like you're disagreeing with what I'm saying. I think the debate, right, is what do we do about it given the situation, you know? So to me, what I think is what I see happen is that organizations kind of start. I think there's a natural progression, right, of a board, right? So you person wakes up one morning and says, I want to make the world better, and that person becomes the executive director of their not-for-profit, and they get their friends in to join the board, and they quickly launch. And you kind of want those people who are going to agree with you in the beginning, right? Because you have a vision and you're not looking for a ton of input, right? You want people that support what you do. And I think it's supposed to create a mentality of where the board is kind of a nice to have, but then at a certain point, they become a burden, right? Because you're not thinking of them as fundraisers. You're not thinking of them as advocates. You're not set up for them to be able to do that work well. And so you get into this vicious cycle, this downward spiral of where, like, I don't want to deal with the board because they're useless. I have to, by law, deal with them. So I do, but I'm not going to deal with them any more than they have to, because I'm not thinking of them as an asset. I'm thinking of them as, at best, you know, something that's sort of neutral, that I'm compliant with some kind of, you know, IRS standard, essentially. And I have to kind of just follow this rule, rather than seeing that if you did take the time, because I look at it and I don't see people putting the time into it and it not working. I see them just not bothering to try and just being frustrated and just saying, well, they're board members, they should just do this. And of course we know that doesn't work. And so to me, I'm still willing to fight the fight. Yes, we've been fighting this fight for quite a while, you and I, for 25 years on an individual basis. But I can also point to success. I can also say, okay, if we look at the sector, eh, eh. But if we look at I think,
Individual test case.
yeah, exactly. And I don't see organizations really thriving without this, right? Like I don't see like the alternative out there. I don't see the thing that's working better, you know. So I'm just not sure what we do with this. I would rather, I think, to put that input in and really have people think about their boards as an asset, but then you have to put some input into it for it to get there.
Well, and I think that's right, because I think that what I see is, I see both things. I see what you described, which is the just, I'm done, I'm not putting any effort into it. And I'm gonna just have my board approve my budget and that's their job, right? But I also see organizations and this is not just true of boards, this is true of so many things where people, you get out of things what you put into it, to your point. And with so many nonprofits, I think I see folks who want outsized results from minimal input, right? And I think, I look at the number of times, just sharing this on a cohort I was doing the other day, that I'll be talking to an organization, they'll say, oh, we want to get more major gifts, and I'll be like, okay, great, let's talk about that. And they'll say, well, what messaging should I include in my direct mail? And I'll say, well, hold up, I thought we were talking about major gifts, right? Like, you're not going to get major gifts from direct mail, like that. So like, your strategy has to be commensurate with your expectation, right? And so yeah, if you come to your board members at every board meeting and just do a basic report out of where you are, and tell them, oh well, as a reminder, you all need to sell your tickets to the event, and then that's it. Like, that's what you're going to get out of them, right? And I think that is the piece of it. We have to put in the effort to get out what we're going to get out. I think that's right. And I think I think there's another core issue at play here, which is we are bringing board members on our boards way too soon. We're bringing people onto our boards as a means to engage them with our work, instead of meaningfully engaging them and making sure they're committed and passionate and excited, and then bringing them onto our board as some of our most committed and most dedicated volunteers, right? So there's, and again, we could probably talk about this for hours, like all the problems and why this is happening. But I guess my other piece of this is, when I look at so many organizations and the challenge with their board, I guess the question I ask is, I don't disagree that we need some set of volunteers, right, that are supportive of our external relations work. I'm just not sure for every nonprofit if the board is that group of volunteers. And, if there are some, now I know when I join a board, I am taking fiscal responsibility of this organization, and fundraising goes hand in hand with that. But I also don't always know if going and finding people who are qualified to be on my audit committee aligns with being a good external ambassador, right? And so are we, not in all cases, but in some cases, are we trying to do too many things with one body? And what is the benefit of potentially looking at how we are engaging other bodies, volunteer bodies, in supporting our fundraising efforts? You look at a campaign, right? You don't have your board run. If you're in a $20 million campaign, your board's not the only volunteer group that's doing that. You have a campaign committee that's supporting that. What if we thought about annual fundraising in a similar way? So I don't know. I could throw that.
Yeah, well, I think we both totally agree on this. That when we make reports or we're talking about this, we're usually talking about like the totality, right? What we would call the volunteer core, and that's the collective of the board and whatever other volunteer bodies you have. I guess I would question if we're doing a not such a great job of volunteer management with our board, how good a job are we doing with
Adding more volunteer
other volunteer bodies? Like I haven't seen where, like, for the
yeah.
most part, I probably have seen it, but I would say it's rare that we're doing a bang up job with this committee over here and a terrible job with the board. But I would agree that like the task at hand is really much more about volunteer management and a volunteer core than the board. Like, the board is one very specific body that does have an oversight role and has some specific responsibilities in addition to the ambassadorial and expertise roles that it brings. And whereas the volunteer core, the broader concept of it, can bring in a lot more. You can have a lot more flexibility around it. You can play around with that and get different things out of that. But my other issue with boards is, like, I just see. So I in some ways I really agree with you, but I think the penalty for it, I think, outweighs, so if you don't have a board that's involved with fundraising, that is anything more than just sort of a group of nice people that bring value of some kind, right? But they're not like organizational changing kind of value. Like it's not like it doesn't have, you could swap in Laurel for Bob and Bob for Laurel and nothing really fundamentally is changing. It's a staff driven organization. And, you know, to the extent that the organization is successful doing whatever it's doing, it's because of staff. I find that that makes you really, really dependent on institutional donors, because that is the one area that you can really, you can drive it through staff, you know, through staff. Now I'd argue you could do it much better with a strong volunteer core and a strong board, but the upper limit, like you really can't have an individual giving program of any meaningful size unless you've been running a direct mail program for 30 years, you know,
Or you're
without,
doing like big events, which
or right, you have a
are
gala.
super transactional and are burning staff out, right?
And that's another TOG chat that we'll have to do, Laurel. But but yes, but now you're really, really dependent on this small group of wealthy people that are very gatekeepery. And, you know, I think we all have our individual frustrations with foundations and how they operate, where you kind of know they're going to go away after a certain period of time. You're almost like a supplicant at worst with some of these, you know, you're really like, you know, having to really kind of bow down and go through a lot of hoops. Now, you know, I think there's some improvement in the industry, but I haven't seen it really to the extent that I would like to see it. And even so, again, you're still dependent on a group of people that have a group of institutions that eventually will take their money and go do something else. So to me, it really puts a ceiling on what that organization can be in terms of money, in terms of whatever outreach you're doing. And to me, that's a bigger problem to me than the problem of, you know, the board is sort of imperfect, because every board, as imperfect as it is, there's always at least a few people on it, right, who get it, who are doing a good job. And I think sometimes that's all you really need. You know, I'd rather have like a place for those 3 or 4 people to go and maybe and occasionally whip everyone else into shape and get them going, than the alternative. But again, that's my feeling about it.
No, I mean, I mean, I'm convinced. I 100% don't disagree. I think maybe the challenge is that we have to think about board composition differently, and we have to think about board engagement differently. I think for a long time, having your board involved with fundraising meant go find really wealthy people who can give your organization big gifts and use board engagement as a way to get them interested in your organization, right? And then we were shocked when those really wealthy people who didn't actually know our organizations very well, because we brought them on too early, weren't following through, weren't making very big gifts or making gifts at all, and certainly weren't reaching out into their networks to help us to engage other people, right? So we have this model that equates board doing community engagement and fundraising work with I have to be wealthy, whether or not I'm particularly passionate about the organization or not, right? And I think that's where a lot of organizations are right now with their boards, is they have like mildly interested people who maybe have means, who are sitting on their boards but kind of don't really care that much, are kind of like agnostic to the actual mission and vision of the organization. And so I think, you know, again, it's how do we really meaningfully engage people before they come on our board? How are we really, really specific about what the roles are and what we expect of people? And how do we stop equating being wealthy with being able to contribute to community engagement and fundraising, right? Because I think that some of the best board fundraisers I've ever seen don't actually have the personal means to make a big gift, but they are so passionate about the organization. They're so excited about what's going on. They will talk to anybody at any time and are the best ambassadors and best advocates for the organization there are, which leads to big gifts, right? And now, of course, would you ideally love to have a couple of people on your board who are capable of making big gifts? Absolutely. Would you love people who have really good networks that they can extend into? Absolutely. But it doesn't have to be every board member, right? And so I think we are also just not very good. When I look at how a lot of boards measure success, it's
Mhm.
often based on giving and giving alone, like what percentage of our board gives and how much. And I think no, that's important. Everyone on your board should make a personally meaningful gift, but I want to measure outputs. I want to measure, are they making stewardship calls? Are they coming on visits with us? Are they going to meet with, you know, to the Chamber of Commerce meeting with me? Right. And reward them for that behavior, right? So make that as rewarding and meaningful as writing a big check.
No, I agree 100% with that. And I think, one of my favorite board stories was a board chair who was the least wealthy person on this particular board, but gave so generously relative to his means that everyone else on the board, he was like a retired public servant. Everyone else was like in finance, but they were like, wow, this guy look at the gift he gave, I better snap to and give a bigger gift. So you can have that. I mean, I agree, like wealth is not everything. I think you always want to have values alignment. You always want to make sure that this group of people believes what you believe, and that's not negotiable. But I just find that you can, even when it's imperfect, if there is enough people on there, those few people who are willing to go that extra mile, and we bother to engage them, and I think that really is on us. I mean, you and I hear mostly here about, "Oh, this board is terrible," or "this board member is terrible." I mean, we could get to hear a lot of like complaining about about boards given our position. But what I would say is that, as a board member over the years, I've been, on a number of different boards over the years, like I know what I'm supposed to do, right? But whether I do it or not has a lot to do with the staff and whether they've given me good instructions, a good program to plug into and bring people to a clear case for support about like what it is I'm doing. I can't tell you how many times with certain boards I've like, all right, I'm supposed to make these calls or I'm supposed to send these emails out, and I'll pick up my phone and I'll be like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know why this is important. I know I'm supposed to do this as a board member, but I'm like, I can't really think of what to say to this person right now because it hasn't at all been made clear to me other than I have an obligation to do it. And I have 50 other things to do today, so I'll do this calls tomorrow.
Well, and what a
And
crappy position to put our boards in, right? To
yeah,
like be doing things out of obligation, not out of passion. And so, yeah, no, I agree with you. The number of times that I've said to a staff person, like, nobody joins a board to be unproductive and annoying to you. Like, nobody joins a board to like ring, like, plotting, like, ooh, how can I make staff's job really difficult? Like, that's not why people join boards, right? And I think you're right. I think that people want to be helpful, but we have to give them the tools. We have to give them the inspiration and the vision. This is the other thing of why vision is so important. Because if it's just about like doing what we do every day, it's really easy to be like, yeah, cut the budget. I don't want to go fundraise, just cut staff. But if there's a powerful, exciting vision that we're working toward, boy, I don't want to cut that budget. I want to go fundraise because I want to make that vision happen, right? So we have to inspire them, and then we have to be really specific about what we'd like them to do, and not just kind of be like, open doors, my least favorite thing in the world. Like, oh,
fundraise,
we need our board to open
fundraise.
doors. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, tell me, like, make these calls, here's a deadline, here's a script, it's super easy, and then follow up with me because I'm a procrastinator and I'm flaky, and like, and then it'll be done, right? Yeah. So anyway, I like everything. Look, Bob, in the end, we totally agree. But I think, I think it is like it's kind of time for people to like take ownership of, you're not just going to wake up with the board of your dreams because you want it. Like and if you're not willing to put the work in, if you're not willing to work on vision and you're not willing to do all these other things, then you have to accept that the work. My favorite quote of all time, right? Carlos Castaneda, you either make yourself happy or miserable, the amount of work is the same, right? Like, and so, you're either going to work really, really hard to make your board productive and that they're going to help you scale, or you're going to do all the work yourself. You're pushing a boulder up a hill either way. How about doing it with a team rather than doing it by yourself?
Yeah, well, maybe the debate itself will get people to be a little bit more active with the board. You know, maybe as we sort of question the structure and the board, that'll get people to be more engaged with it, because I do think this is ultimately an engagement question. And I'm pretty sure I've had at least one board member who did wake up every day thinking about how to make my life harder. But that was the
And
exception.
then something we don't even have time to talk about, which is, you know, the rule of thirds, right? On any, like to your point, on any given board, you're gonna have a handful of folks who are super motivated, super engaged, a handful of folks who like could get there if we did the right things, and then like a handful of folks who just either actively don't want to be there or are just so disengaged there's no bringing them along. And I think like, yeah, on any given board you have those folks, but maybe we need to be a little more proactive in getting those folks off the
Yeah,
board because they are demotivating to the other two thirds, right? And they kind of, you know, give the other 2/3 reasons to not be as motivated and excited. So
well, like you said, Laura, once again, we've come back around, and I think we do largely agree. So that makes me feel better, because I wouldn't want us to, diverge too far.
the
But
world would not work very well.
okay,
Yeah.
it makes for more interesting conversations. So, well, listen, everyone, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for the space for further conversations. Go out there and engage your board and get the most out of them. And if you think of better board structures, we are all ears. Please leave some comments. We'd love to hear about it if you're doing something that's outside of this model. So thanks again, and we'll see you at the next TRG chat.
Thanks, everyone.